On the surface, Miami doesn't seem like a team that builds through the draft, but does the team's history really reflect that? And what kind of player does Pat Riley typically look for? We'll get you ready for the draft with a deeper dive on Miami's draft history on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Have a great show for you today. It's June 2nd, which means it's the start of draft month for us. The first round of the draft is on June 25th. The Heat are holding a watch party at Kaseya Center where you can watch the draft from the arena with Heat fans. Tickets are free, and you can RSVP on the Heat website. We're planning something around the event as well, along with the Heat, so stay tuned for that. But until then, we're starting our Blue Notebook series where we scout various prospects. We do our deep dives on them. David and I get into the film room, do our homework on these guys, and then present our findings to all of you. It's our Blue Notebook scouting series. We're starting on Tuesday with some players who can help juice Miami's offense. But before we dive into the specific prospects, we wanted to zoom out, take a look at the Heat's recent draft history to see if we could find some patterns so that to what they're doing in the draft. And so that's what we're going to be doing on today's show. And at the end, we'll actually talk about a few prospects who maybe fit those patterns. But let's go back in history, kind of look at what the Heat have valued in previous drafts, David. I was looking at the Wikipedia page and the basketball reference stuff of just their recent drafts. And there's a clear line, at least to me, a line of demarcation. And I'm going to call it the modern Heat era, when the modern Heat era begins, which is really post Big Three, after 2014. And you can see a very stark change in the kind of players that they're taking, how they approach the draft, frankly, how they just value the draft in and of itself. You can see a very big difference post Big Three. Here's who they've taken since the summer of 2015, because I'm not even counting the summer of 2014 because they took Shabazz Napier. Right. We weren't even sure if LeBron was going to be here. So really the first draft in mind that didn't include LeBron James on the roster was 2015. They took Justice Winslow in the first round, Josh Richardson in the second round. No pick in 2016. 2017, they take Bam in the first round. And no pick in 2018. In 2019, they take Tyler Herro. 2020, they take Precious Achiuwa. And no pick in 2021. In 2022, they take Nikola Jovic. In 2023, they take Jaime Jaquez Jr. And in 2024, they take Kel'el Ware. So about 10 years of draft history, that's it right there. Does anything stand out to you in terms of what they're looking for in sort of the modern Heat era?
It's really funny because you don't really recognize it. I said it in the opener, and it's just, I think everybody kind of pegs Miami as this team that drafts a certain way. When they selected Jaime a couple seasons ago, it was like, oh, this is such a Heat guy. And yet the draft reflects the exact opposite of that. They take swings a lot more than you might expect, and they're betting on potential. All the names that you listed, with the exception of Jaime Jaquez, where these guys have some kind of big time potential and versatility, and that's what we're looking for. That's what we're hoping to add here, because all those picks, Bam, a 1 year player at Kentucky, Tyler, a 1 year player at Kentucky, Nico, I mean, a European player. Again, this is a team that you wouldn't think adds European players, but they've taken their chances in the past. They're looking to add versatile potential with almost every pick, the exception being Jaime, because that was a team that had just gone to the finals, was poised to acquire Dame Lillard, and they wanted what they view as a more ready to play player. And certainly Jaime fit the bill. And that was somebody who was going to add and contribute right away to the roster, and he certainly did. And so there was a specific need. But other than that, they're looking to kind of take a swing on somebody that might wind up blossoming into a star. And in some cases that's happened, especially in Bam and Tyler. In other cases it hasn't. But I think that's the approach that they take, which is, I think, again, not one that you typically associate with the Heat front office.
And I think it reflects all of the work that they've put into their development program. That's the bet, right? Hey, we have one of the world-class development programs. Why would we take a ready-made prospect? We make the prospects into the players we need. They want those moldable balls of clay that they can work with. And if you just sort of look aesthetically at these players, they don't really have a ton in common, although there are a few commonalities here. But really what it comes down to is it's a mindset thing. And as cliche as it sounds, do they have that Heat culture stuff? You hear these words talked about all the time when it comes to their prospects over the years. Hard work, toughness, IQ. Those three words come up a lot. And what that measures, at least to the Heat, is their capacity for development, their capacity to get better. And yes, you can look at the wingspan and the vertical leap and the stats in college and the way that those have progressed and whatever. You could look at all that stuff, and certainly that stuff is valuable. But what the Heat have also done over the years is they've trusted their gut. Not their gut. That feels like it's sort of whimsical. They've trusted their homework. They've trusted their own work. They stick to their board, right? And they eliminate players who they don't think fit Heat culture. As they say all the time, we're not for everybody. Okay, well, those somebodies that aren't for Heat culture, they're off the board. They're not on the Heat's board. And there are guys that do make the Heat's board. And those are the guys who, through interviews and research and talking to the player, to people around the player, all these things, they feel, okay, that guy is going to be dedicated to the work, and he's going to come into Heat culture, and instead of crumbling beneath it, he's going to thrive and be able to build with it. And that's part of the thing that they've done. What's also very apparent, I think, over the years in doing that kind of work is Adam Simon, within league circles, has become one of sort of the hot names in the draft. Like, he's kind of widely respected as, oh, Adam Simon likes that guy. We should probably, if you're another GM, you're like, oh, Adam Simon likes that guy. You kind of hear through the grapevine, maybe we should take a second look at that guy. If Adam Simon likes him, we should probably look at him. He's becoming one of those guys. Chet Kammerer, who's based on the West Coast and does all the California stuff and other stuff on the West Coast. He's long considered one of the best in the business. And all these guys have been in-house. And I think that's the other thing that stands out about Miami in terms of how they approach this is they've all been working together for so long. Keith Askins is a very big voice in that too. And in terms of we all kind of know what we're looking for at this point. And they've identified a type. But to your point, David, like maybe it's not, there's not like a clear cut, like the Orlando Magic take every 6'8" wing with a 7'1" wingspan, right? We just know it. They're just going to take those guys. Miami, it's not as clear cut, like kind of like an aesthetic profile. It's more of a mindset thing, and that's to me what stands out when I look at this.
Yeah, those are all really good points. I think the one exception, I'm just pointing it out now because I think it bears noting, it was Justice Winslow. And I mean, you and I were covering that draft, and we knew the team was picking 10th. Winslow was not supposed to drop to the Heat, and I don't think he panned out, and maybe they didn't scout him as fully as they would, but there was so much potential there. He was supposed to be a top 5 pick.
Yeah,
and he
people thought he was going to go 4 to the Knicks.
Yes,
or
and they wanted taking Porzingis instead, and then the draft was changed from that point forward. It just kind of went in a completely different trajectory, and then they were at 10, and it was, again, the comparison was an easy one to make at the time, and I think it's very important. It felt like Caron Butler in 2002 because this was a player who was not supposed to be there and kind of had dropped a little bit, and then you find him at 10, and you're like, yeah, of course we're going to take him. We all know the history and the rumored trade from Boston with Danny Ainge, and he offered 3 picks, etc. Whatever, it didn't work out. That was the expectation for Justice Winslow. He was supposed to be that kind of guy. He shot 38% from 3 or almost 40% from 3 at Duke. He was this great wing player, strong enough to handle bigs, versatile and quick enough to handle guards defensively. Like, there was a lot to like about.
And that was on the heels of the big Kawhi Leonard pop, right?
Yes.
And so everybody was looking for their next Kawhi. You can even see it in this draft. People, Stanley Johnson going at 8, Justice Winslow going 10. People were Kelly Oubre going 15. Everybody was looking for their Kawhi.
Ooh. That
feels like an eternity. But I'm glad you brought up the Winslow thing because I do think that was a mistake Miami learned from, right? And so maybe even the modern Heat era of draft would have been post Justice Winslow.
But 100%.
You
Like,
wonder
even if
Justice
somebody
goes,
drops to them, I think it's not to cut you off, but even if somebody drops to them, I think the point you just made before, it's like,
Exactly.
no, we're not going to do that. We don't know about that guy. You like that guy? Then you should have taken him.
last
We
year,
like this guy.
last year with Dalton Connect, they're like,
Yeah.
no, we want Kel'el Ware. That's the guy we're taking.
Yeah.
You wonder, had the Heat not done that, where they probably, oh my God, I can't believe this guy who was supposed to be a top 5 drop to us. We gotta take this swing. We gotta take this chance on him. If they would have just trusted their own board, do they just take Devin Booker, a Kentucky guy
Yes.
who went 13? You'd think so,
Yes.
right? You'd think they would have just went Booker, or Miles Turner goes right after Justice Winslow. Trey Lyles goes right after Turner. I still think Trey Lyles would have been good had he gotten to the right drafted to Utah, ends up playing for Sacramento, whatever.
It would have been Booker. It would have been Booker. I mean, I know that's a big what if. Yeah, I think it's a big what if, but we know already. Like he liked the team. He performed well, and they just they weren't prepared for it. All of a sudden, a top 5 talent with this kind of, again, the next Kawhi, the versatility that every team around the league was looking for falls in your lap. You kind of have to take that chance, because if not, you could wind up having egg on your face and you look really foolish. But I think they have learned their lesson. It really is interesting. Again, even in this look back, you kind of just say, you know what? They're going to stick to their guns. They know who they like. They have to know. And in their scouting, they probably wouldn't have seen that Justice was maybe not at that point in time mentally ready for the NBA transition. Physically, 100%. Mentally, maybe not so much. And they probably would have been able to glean that in more draft analysis, because they knew Booker was that guy. But again, it was the talent, the versatility that they loved in Winslow, that everybody loved in Winslow, and it became available at 10. They had to take that chance. But I think you're absolutely right, because they had Whiteside, or at least the potential of Whiteside. I don't think they would have gone Turner. I think they would have gone Booker, because, again, it was just easy to say, you know what, we're going to groom the next Dwayne, because we don't know how much longer he'll be able to play at this high level, and we could kind of bring him in, and the comp was very easy, and it would have just been a natural transition there. He would have been the next star on this team.
So we're already sort of touching on it here, but how has that process for Miami changed over the years in terms of how they approach the draft? What kind of players are they looking for now, and what kind of players in this draft fit that profile? We'll talk about all of that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Believe me, I know, between dining out or online shopping or maybe a little entertainment mixed in here and there, it's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. They're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial control center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start actually building wealth. Believe me, you'll use Monarch Money, and next thing you know, you realize how much money you're spending on things that maybe you could kind of cut out a little bit. And now you'll find that you can budget smarter and save more money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com, and you get 50% off your first free year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA, if you want 50% off your first year. We'll be right back.
So let's talk about how Miami's process has changed in terms of how they approach the draft over the years. We already talked about that first thing, and I think that's a really big thing. They trust their board. They do the work. They've invested into their scouting department. They've invested time into how they approach these prospects. You're now starting to hear things over the last few years about how Miami is one of these teams that not every team scours the globe, right? You would think everybody's looking for the next Giannis or the next, like, who's the next Luka Doncic or Victor Wembanyama or Nikola Jokic blossoming somewhere in Europe or not every team does it. Miami's one of those teams. They do it. They're at every invitational. They're at every overseas tournament. They're at all these things. Yep. So that's a big part. Is just the investment of time, resources, all of that. This is another thing that popped out when I was looking at their draft history, though. The Heat used to trade picks on draft night all the time. And this is a little bit about what you were talking about before, is the Heat have had under Pat Riley this idea, the notion that they don't value the draft, that they're going to build through trades and free agency. And that is very, very far from the case lately. Miami is reluctant to give up these first round picks, maybe even too reluctant, right? You could argue maybe they've gone too far the other way in terms of not moving some of these first round picks for win now players. But at the same time, you talk to people in the front office all the time and they'll say, look, in the new CBA, we need cheap, young talent on controllable deals. You need to build through those guys. And Andy Ellsberg and Pat Riley and all these guys have recognized that, and they said, look, we've invested in the development program for a reason. We're going to use these draft picks, and we're gonna turn our roster into a draft pick roster. And you look even at the team now, it's built through the draft. Bam, Herro, Ware, Duncan Robinson was undrafted. Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez, Haywood Highsmith, undrafted, played for Philadelphia for a little bit, but was a development guy for them. You just look up and down the roster; it's a drafted roster for the most part. But going back to the part where they're about them trading their picks, they don't even really move up and down in the draft anymore. And that was the surprising thing. They used to do that even a lot more. In 2014, they moved up for Shabazz Napier. In 2012, they moved out of the draft after taking Arnett Moultrie. In 2011, they moved out of the draft after taking Bojan Bogdanovic. Even before LeBron, they used to trade around and out of the draft all the time, sort of move up and down or out or whatever. But you look over the last 10 years, they've traded out of only 2 second-round picks in the last 10 years. And they've not traded a first-round pick on draft night since 2014. That, to me, is pretty remarkable. But to me, the more interesting thing in terms of how they're going to approach the draft later this month is, even if there's a player that they love, they're not really going to – they're probably not – they have not at least moved up to go get that guy. They have had plenty of guys on their board, and they basically just say, okay, we have our board. Whoever's there when we get to our pick – we're going to just take the guy that's on the top of our board of whoever's left. They don't really move up and around the way that they used to.
No. I think, again, another case in which they were burned, the Casey Opala thing. That was probably maybe their biggest miscue of all time, at least in recent history, because they just believed so much in his potential, and they thought that trading into the draft was going to pay off to a huge degree, and they quickly learned that was not the case. So I think that was really where they kind of blew it there, and I think they've learned and changed. But just this is like a philosophical approach that permeates throughout the front office. They always see themselves as visionaries and kind of reading the room and anticipating the future a lot more than you might think. Because again, this is reputation, the stability, the consistency, the work, and everything else like that. That is not really how this front office operates. And I love that you brought that point up about the CBA, because that's really how they see it. It's like, what? We recognize very quickly that teams are going to be hamstrung financially because of the way this works out. So we have to start preparing for it. And the best way of doing that is by getting, and I hate to say it, but cheap labor, that's available, that's talented, that we can have under team, control for a long period of time, so that we can making sure that we get them up to snuff. And I think that's also where you kind of see the baseline of what kind of player they want. And I didn't expect this from Kel'el, because we didn't really hear that in terms of what he was able to do collegiately. But we heard about it from Ware during the course of the season. We heard about it from Nico. We heard about it from Jaime when he was blossoming collegiately. It's the acceptance and the embracing of the work. And that's Heat culture.
Yeah.
And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for guys who are just gym rats. They love that. You're a gym rat, you're our guy. You want to spend 40 hours a day at the gym? Yeah.
Because that also speaks to their own their trust in their own process, right? Because the word on Kel'el Ware after 1 year in college was, oh, this guy doesn't want it enough.
Right.
There's moments where there's questions about his motor concern. You hear this all the time. You'll hear it even in this draft. And when I'm telling you, we looked at a Kel'el Ware. We did our blue notebook at Kel'el Ware, but we're like, all these motor concerns that you keep hearing about, like, are the Heat actually going to draft this guy? And I'm on record of not liking the tape on Kel'el Ware in college. I'm on record, and I stand by it. He didn't play, but I probably underestimated Miami's ability to just be like, you're not going to play like that anymore, and just transforming this guy. But it also speaks to the work ethic Kel'el Ware did, and in whatever the Heat found in their own research and look into this guy, they said, you know what? We're not concerned about the motor issues that everybody else is. We're not concerned about the heart, the hustle, the 1-2, all this narrative that's out there. We're not concerned about it. We like this guy. We like what he's made out of. And so they're going to trust their own work on it and not necessarily look at the mock drafts or the public scouting reports or whatever the word is that's just sort of been out there. I think the other The other thing that's changed here in looking for a pattern is it's easy to try to connect these dots and be like, oh yeah, it's the 1-2, it's the heart and hustle. It's equal. I also think that they're willing to surprise us.
Yeah.
I think they have guidelines and principles and things. We also know, like, even going back to the trading up and around the draft, they had conversations about trading into the top 10 last summer. We think it was for Zach Edey, but they had conversations about potentially trading into the top 10. They didn't do it, but they're going to have the conversations. They're going to do their due diligence. If the price to moving up in the top 10 was, not enough for that, was to them like a bargain, they might have done it, right? Because we also know that the Heat front office looks for bargains. They look to win trades. So some of these rules that they might have almost conflict with each other. We're always looking to win trades, but we also don't want to trade up. But what if we trade up? In trading up, we're winning that trade. It's like, okay, well, then we have to have that conversation. The Jovic thing was very surprising. You and I didn't even scout him at all because we're like, this team doesn't take European players. They just never do it. Now they do. Kel'el Ware was a little surprising because, again, the narrative that's out there. They did their homework. So it's easy in retrospect to kind of go back and be like, oh, of course, this is why they took these players. And now it makes sense kind of when it all kind of comes together. But in the moment, it feels like we're always surprised. Remember how surprised we were when they took Bam?
Yes.
Like, in the moment, it kind of feels like we're always going to be surprised on draft night, even though in looking back, it's easy to make sense of it.
Yeah. They had Whiteside. He was the future. You draft Bam, and then you sign Kelly Olynyk as a free agent for a lot of money too. It's like, why do you need three very different centers and one of them being a rookie? Like, what's the plan here? And they just saw, again, the evolving landscape of the NBA requiring bigs that showed versatility, and you had at least two of those in Bam and Olynyk, and then Whiteside. Well, from what he had first year with Miami as a major project, and unfortunately that just wasn't the case. And the league changed a little bit too. So I would say, and maybe this is reductive or overly simplistic, but I guess would be, again, because of the way to their board, they probably have and for this year's draft, if he's still there at maybe 13, 14, I think that's when they start to have the conversation about whether or not they trade up in the draft, because they're just that high on their guy and they trust that process so much that if somehow somebody that they totally expect to be off the board by 10, and if somehow he might be available at a certain number, that's when you start to have these conversations saying, we believe that strongly in this person, that we want to be able to trade up in the drafts. Because I think that's kind of what they did with Opala, and completely, but that's how they perceive the situation. It's like, this is a really talented swing man who has all this potential and everything else like that. They did the research on him and it just didn't pan out. But I wonder if that's kind of how they operate. It's like, you know what? We thought this guy was going to get picked well before this, and now all of a sudden he's at this point where he's attainable.
Right.
We've got to figure out a way.
And that's why you're always having conversations with these other front offices on draft night, and because you never know what's really going to happen and how the board's going to break and whether or not maybe moving out. Like I said, the one thing that has been consistent every single time is that we tend to be surprised by the Heat, even if it's really easy to make sense of it in retrospect. That said, there is one thing that we know for sure the Heat are looking for. We'll take a look at some specific players in this draft that could be Heat guys coming up after this. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. So before I get to some prospects who maybe make sense and fit the profile of a Miami Heat guy, two things really stand out to me when I look at who the Heat are looking for. Having, just looking at their history, talking with people on the team, all these things over the years. Two things. Number one is the first thing that we already discussed. They have a chance to thrive in Heat culture. Hard work, toughness, IQ, capacity to develop and get better. These are the things that they're looking for. This is the deep down research. This is the trust your scouting department stuff. This is the build your big board the way that you see it. It's a Heat big board. It's not an NBA big board, right? There's a very big difference. So when you're looking at ESPN's big board, that's a general NBA big board. Everybody's individual big board across the league is going to look a lot different based on their own team needs and preferences and things like that. They have a Heat board. They trust it. They stick to it. And it's because the guys on that board are Heat culture guys or people who they believe to be and have the capacity to thrive in Heat culture. So that's the first thing. We already talked about it. The second thing, if we were going to look for a physical profile thing where you could start just crossing names off, the last 4 picks that the Heat have taken, nobody's been under 6'6". And they have all had advanced ball skills for their position. So you look at Nikola Jovic. Surprising when it happened. Advanced ball skills at his position. 6'10", 6'11", whatever. Jaime Jaquez. 6'6", 6'7", advanced ball skills for his position. That's it, right? Those two guys very different. Jovic from overseas, very young, very raw. Jaquez from the States, went to college for multiple years. Very different sort of backgrounds, but in that they are both 6'6" with advanced ball skills for their position, or at least 6'6". That's the similarity there. Kel'el Ware, obviously huge. Advanced ball skills for his position, his ability to catch the ball at its highest point, to run with it, to dribble with it, the stuff that he's shown on the perimeter, the dribble handoff stuff, advanced ball skills for his position. You can even go back further to guys like Bam, Precious Achiuwa. The only guy who didn't really fit over the last 10 years was Tyler Herro.
Yeah.
And he's 6'5". I mean, he's big for his position anyway, you could argue.
Yeah.
So it's not that it's that far off. But over the last 4 drafts, it's been 6'6", nobody under 6'6", advanced ball skills for their position. So we could be surprised again, but if I'm looking at my draft board right now and I'm looking at guys that could be on Miami's board, if you're basically small for your position, I'm going to cross you off, at least for the first round.
I would say that's fair. And again, and also just even to put a pin on the Tyler discussion, like he had excelled so much in shooting drills and overperformed anything that they had done historically that they were like, okay, we got to take a chance on this guy. And it paid off. I mean, whatever you might think or dislike about Tyler Herro's game, if that's how you're prone to think, you have to acknowledge that you wound up selecting an all-star who has gotten better in every NBA season that he's been a part of the league. And you won't find that. You're already are on top. Whether you think that he's getting overpaid or he's overrated or you just don't like his game aesthetically, whatever your concerns might be, I get it. But you're drafting an all-star, and
there were 4 all-stars taken in the first round that year.
Yeah,
Zion Williamson, John Morant, Darius Garland, Tyler Herro. There's obvious and public concerns out there with the first 2 picks.
Yep.
And it's not like Miami was in position to draft those guys anyway. You do wonder, had they, like, if PJ Washington, who goes at 12, falls to 13, if Charlotte takes Herro instead of Washington,
it's an interesting one.
A lot of this is also how the board breaks. Because you look after Tyler Herro, and it's Romeo Langford, who there was 100 questions about that guy's character coming out of the college.
Yep.
Sekou Doumbouya, who barely one of my favorite guys. I remember in that. I was very high on Sekou. I'll take the L on that.
But he fits that mold too, right? He fits that mold. He was just like a guy. But again, I would think it was just Tyler, the homegrown product. I think they're going to go for the homegrown product 9 times out of 10, unless that 10th product is just like remarkable. And I think that's kind of what they saw in Nico, a guy who was 6'11", who could shoot, who could bring the ball up, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of where they went away from what they typically do. But in Tyler's case, it's like we can bring a guy that we know, that we trust, Calipari, that we know what he's gotten from his players because he coached Bam, etc. So we trust that he's been coached the right way, and we know about his work. It's already become like legendary in his 1 year at Kentucky. And if we can add that kind of player and what we saw from him in our own drills and scouting process, and we take that chance over even a guy that has like all this potential and did check a lot of boxes. Like for all that Sekou, he never wind up really being an NBA player. He did check a lot of those boxes in terms of what he typically looked for.
So again, there's wiggle room in all this stuff, like you're talking about. But generally speaking, I think they're looking for guys with size. And I remember even asking Pat Riley about this a couple years ago. Just like, hey, what are you looking for in the draft? And he goes, size, versatility, for guys who could play multiple positions. I was like, cool, thanks. And then they've literally just done that the last couple of years. So the natural next thing, who are guys in this draft who maybe fit that? So we're going to do our deep dive in Blue Notebooks. Maybe we disagree with this. We haven't even really, you and I have just started beginning the scouting stuff on our homework. But just looking at big boards, and again, Miami has their own board. They have their own opinions of these guys. But just looking at like a quick scan of some of the big boards that are out there, I have 4 names that jumped out in terms of guys who could be available around 20. Cedric Coward, he's like a long, versatile guard out of Washington State. Everybody talks about character guy, hard worker, all this stuff. Size for his position, defensive minded, all that stuff. Will Riley, 6'8" wing out of Illinois. No nonsense, low maintenance, could score. People talk about his hard work, all that kind of stuff. Or has already done a workout with Miami, so I guess that's important. Asa Newell, big, versatile Georgia big man. Again, I don't know that the Heat would be looking for another big after drafting Ware, but just a guy who sort of fits the profile of guys I typically look at. And then Adu Thiero, switchable forward, defensive-minded, hard worker, got that dog on him, out of Arkansas, so played for John Calipari, who's now the coach at Arkansas. I think that might, like the Calipari piece might also be an underrated piece in this.
Yeah.
The Heat like Calipari guys. So
yeah,
those are the sort of the names that jumped out. I don't know if you had any others.
Frank Martin, that's another. Like again, that makes a lot of sense. Like I mean, you did a great feature on Jaime Jaquez, and I mean their ability to trust like the coaching staff and to hear all the good things and what he was able to do. They want a player who's been taught right.
That's a big
takes all the work on their own. Yeah, that's they want to be able to a player that can learn, that has been coached well, accepts coaching. Right. And that's so important for Spo in the front office. So they're definitely looking
I'm glad you brought that up because there is like I said, it's a big Spoelstra thing. Like there is a understanding, hey, we have the best development program in the league. So we can turn these balls into clay. But if that ball of clay doesn't know how to box out, like I don't even want to do it. Like Spo's like, hey, you can't just you can't bring me 15-year-olds. Like you gotta bring me somebody who's at least been coached up on the fundamentals where I'm not starting from complete scratch on this kid. So
absolutely.
Which you totally understand if you're Eric Spoelstra and the standard that you hold guys to. But did I miss any names or should we just end it there and let people look forward to
yeah, because I think there's going to be some surprises. Like I think what we're talking about is like a general approach, and I think that it's really important because you kind of tend to project your own expectations. Oh, this guy has all this talent. Well, he's 6'2" and he's kind of undersized for his position. He's not on the Heat board. That's just the reality. They're not going to take that player. So there's a lot of things
they do. Right? Unless we're surprised again.
I mean, Tyler was one exception, but then we won't hear about it. That's like we found out about Tyler after the fact, that when he went to Miami and he did this shooting drill.
Yeah, he made like 1 billion threes
in a row. He put up historically good numbers there,
Yeah.
like exceeded everything that anybody had ever done. And they're like, yeah, we got to take this guy.
Well, I guess maybe in that sense, they were also seeing, what Steph had done and where the league was going with 3-point shooting. They said, hey, this is a league trend. So maybe that's another part that we probably left out there is they're seeing where the league is going and they're trying to at least, if not get ahead of it, stay on pace with it. And that was sort of what was going on with Tyler. And it ended up being the right pick. Like we just discussed what happened in that first round. That was 100% the right pick there.
So quickly,
even with a guy like Jovic or Ware, they're saying, look, like size is important again, right? Small ball had its day in the sun, and now size is really important again. We're going to draft front court guys, right? They haven't drafted a backcourt player since Tyler in the first round.
So quickly, if you had to read the temperature across the league, what would you say the Heat is looking for in terms of that they're able to see into the future a little bit and be like, how it was 10 years ago, we need the next Draymond Green. They get Bam Adebayo, et cetera. What is that player that they're looking for around the league or in the next couple of years in terms of what they think is the next evolutionary phase?
Right. And I think it's important to also know here where they're choosing, right? You could, if you were picking in the top 5 and you have a chance to get Cooper Flagg, that's obviously where the league is going. Big players with ball skills who could defend at an elite level. Everybody would love Cooper Flagg. The Heat can't take him. That's, I think, maybe like the Aaron Nesmith type, the low maintenance wing who could defend multiple positions, but is super athletic. I think strength is something that is underrated in today's NBA, and I think that's something the Heat have gotten ahead of. Quite frankly, I think they've really made that an initiative.
If I had to sum it up,
I think. And shooting is always important. Shooting is always going to be important.
If I had to sum it up, I think they're looking for like exceptional playmakers because we're seeing how important those points. I mean, we made this. We had this show a couple of weeks ago. Like you look at the top teams in the league and how they progressed to their respective conference finals. And I think a guy like Halliburton,
you know what I mean? That's why I kind of made the difference. It's like if you're picking the top 10, Can we go find a advantage creator like that? At 20, probably not. But maybe.
You never know.
You never know. Brunson was a second-round pick, right? He was in the Eastern Conference Finals. Jokic was obviously a second-round pick during a Taco Bell commercial. Like, you could find these guys in different places. Maybe that's not something that they should rule out completely. That'll do it for us today. Tomorrow, we will have our very first installment of our Blue Notebook series. We're going to be talking about guys who can help juice Miami's offense. So you're not going to want to miss that. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.